have politically, you know. So out of this number also, you have, when you talk of the children of immigrants, 82% of the children of Hispanic or Latino immigrants are English proficient. 92% of the children of Asian, you know, families are English proficient. 95% of the children of African immigrants are, you know, English proficient. So you can see, you know, the Africans, Latino, the Asians, then the Latinos. And the African immigrants, you know, most of them predominantly come from English-speaking countries. So they're already, you know, used to English as a language. And then also those from Asia, you know, like Indians, you know, Pakistanis, Malaysians, they're also used to English language, you know, rather than the Asian, I mean, the Latin American, you know, immigrants' children. Now, the undocumented workers in Tennessee contribute or pay about $175 million in taxes.
$175 million in taxes.
Exactly.
These are the undocumented immigrants.
That's correct.
Folks that we really want to run out of town and don't want to believe that they're taking the jobs away from everybody.
That's correct. They contribute $175 million in taxes to the state of Tennessee. You know, and according to labor statistics, if you have to run all the undocumented workers out of Tennessee, the state will lose about $3.8 billion and also 22,000 workers. So you know how big that is. Now, with the legal immigrants, or everybody put together, in 2010 or 2007 to 10, the purchasing power of the Hispanic population is $6.1 billion, the purchasing power. The purchasing power of the Asian, you know, population was $3.8 billion. The purchasing power of the African immigrants were about $500 million. Now, on business and ownership of business, the Asian community owned about 12,000 businesses, generating a receipt of about $3.5 billion. The Hispanic community had about 9,000 businesses, generating receipts of about $1.6 billion. The African community, about 1,000 businesses, generating about $500 million. So you can see how much revenue immigration brings to the state.
To the state.
Okay.
It brings more than it takes out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then the 141 million that foreign students bring into the economy here. So you can see that, you know, it's a win-win for both sides, both the government and the immigrants, both legal and illegal, you know. So that can tell you the politics of immigration.
Good.
Now, some people want them to go, but at the same time don't want them to go.
They got a mixed feeling in reference to there's so many of them, but we can't do without them. We need them.
Exactly. That's the contradiction. You know, you think about somebody who has a construction business and say, okay, 80% of those, you know, who work for him are immigrants. Then if you run those 80% away, he doesn't have, you know, a job. There'll be no job creation, you see. So business people see it that way. And that's the problem in really dealing with it. Because those who want it to stop are not those who really making money. Those who are making money don't want it to stop because that's the way they make money. You know, if somebody's going to pay somebody 50 cents an hour, why get somebody you are going to pay $7 an hour? You see?
Is that the kind of discrepancy that we're talking about when we talk about the wages that these individuals make, Dr. Madu?
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Because a lot of them who cross the border, you know, so to speak, quote, illegally, they will accept anything to work, to pay their bills and send money back to their family. You know, whether they're in El Salvador, Nicaragua, or Mexico, or whatever, or Honduras. So they don't really necessarily mind how much they are paid, as far as they are paid some. You know, so that's advantage to employers. And think about those who have vegetables and all this to pick in California, in Texas. They need some people to do that work. And those who did that work before are not willing to do that now.
Yeah, and especially for those prices. Now, it's hard to get an American out into a vegetable field for 25 or 35 cents an hour.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. So that's the problem. So if those, they can get to pay them below minimum wage, can't do the work, then there's nothing.
Dr. LMadu, let us take this short commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. LMadu, and the topic is the impact of immigration on the state of Tennessee. And he's given us some amazing figures in reference to the population as well as some of the activities that many of these groups are involved in, that simply leads us to believe that they play a significant part in the economy of the state of Tennessee as well as the economy of the nation. Dr. LMadu, let's pick up where we left off in reference to that.
The last statistics show that the whole immigrants in the United States contributed $775 billion to the economy. Most of the new inventions, that MIT, Caltech, Harvard, are by immigrants, one quarter, of them. Most of the PhDs are immigrants. That's one of the reasons, the Silicon Valley and all this wants to keep them. Now, overall, why do immigrants come? Some of them come because of the conditions in their countries. Some of them are professionals, who've been, granted some visas, employment visas to be here. Some of them came also because of civil strife. For example, I mentioned the El Salvadorians. The Nicaraguans were also given waivers, to come here when there was strife in the country between the Sandinistas, and the United States government. A lot of them were given visas to come here. When there was problem in Vietnam, when the Saigon government fell, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese were given visas to come to the United States. When Saddam Hussein was overthrown, hundreds of thousands of Kurds, were given visas to come here also. And in fact, Nashville has the largest number of Kurds in the whole United States. You have about 11,000 Kurds who were resettled here in Nashville, Tennessee. That's why they call Nashville the little Kurdistan. Or or the southern Kurdistan of the United States, because this is where you have the largest number. When there was strife in Somalia, after the overthrow of President Siad Barre, a lot of Somalis were given, visas to come to this country. That's why you have about 5,000 Somalis who are settled here in Nashville, Tennessee. People don't know that this is one of the largest Somali, community in the country. When there was strife in Sudan, the Southern Sudanese, the State Department also gave them a lot of visas to resettle here in the United States. About 2,500 of them were resettled here. When there was strife in Ethiopia, when Mengistu's government was overthrown and there was civil war, a lot of thousands of Ethiopians were also given visas to come to the United States and stay. A lot of them ended up here in Nashville. Same from Uganda, same from Tanzania. Then in Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, they all have agreements to a number of refugees or legal immigrants, every year to the United States. Now the problem we are having is that a lot of, those that the government wants to send back, to to their countries have been here for long, established and all that, which is the 11 million we're talking about. But at the same time, this 11 million contribute a whole lot of money to the United States economy. And most of their employers actually want them to stay. Because without those workers, those companies will fold. You've seen a lot of companies shutting down here and there, before. Yeah, when the deportation rate, was spiking up, a lot of them started going back, to Mexico or to Nicaragua, where they came from, until they stopped again and they started coming back. See, so a lot of businesses, particularly the housing business, agriculture business, they need them because some of the jobs they do, most people won't do it for the price that the employers are willing to pay. Now if an employer is willing to pay somebody $4 an hour to dig ditches on the road, most Americans won't accept that, that kind of money for anything. How much more digging, ditches on the road. So when you have those people send them back, that employer loses a lot of money, and what happens? The company folds up. And you know that most businesses in this country are created by small businesses, who hire 10, 20, 30 people, 50 people here and there. And most of those small businesses need this kind of workers because the wages are not high. They don't have to pay social security and all this. They just pay them.
And sometimes it's paying in cash and forget the whole thing. No tax records or no kind of records. And that's now, is that that's a real problem in terms of immigrant. Now, what about the labor unions in the state of Tennessee? How do they feel about this immigrant population, Dr. Madu?
Well, I think it's twofold. The labor union supports legalization and paying them fair and adequate wages because you benefit the unions, instead of paying them under the table. So the union is strongly in favor of legalization. Exactly. But at the same time, doesn't want mass deportations because it will affect them too. You see, because if a lot of those companies and organizations who belong to labor union are heavily influenced with the Latino population, particularly in California. You talk of the growers business and all this, they are predominantly from Latin America, you see. So the labor union is caught in between. But the best, policy is favor, legalization, but at the same time, fair wages for these immigrants. Because at times it becomes exploitation. See, when you use them and don't pay them adequately. But then most of them, since they are undocumented, cannot complain anyway. Okay, they won't complain. That's the problem. So even if they are not paid, they won't even complain for fear of surfacing and the authorities, getting them.
And so they're sort of under fear of not receiving the kind of adequate wage, but at the same time they're also fearful of the fact that if they make too much noise about it, then they might not have a job at all. And if they don't have a job at all, then they are almost automatically deported because of no wages, no jobs, and et cetera. And so
that's correct.
Well, now, Dr. Madu, looking over this whole issue, and I think we've talked about Tennessee, and I think the same thing could be said in reference to many other states, especially in the Southeast, et cetera. But now, when we talk about having a national immigration policy, what are some of the options that the government has now in reference to this policy?
Well,
we've got about 2 minutes.
The government has an option of, quite frankly, legalizing those already in the country. And that's what a lot of immigration advocates want to see. It's difficult to expel 11 million people, most of them with families, wives, children, all this. It's just not going to happen that way, see? And that's why the government wants to legalize immigrants, within a certain space of time. Let everybody, have a green card or a temporary green card to see how they behave in so many years, and then you get you get a permanent green card, then you can apply for citizenship. I think that's what the government wants to do. At the same time, there are some elements within the immigration bill that they are fighting over now that is unfavorable. For example, they want to drop what they call the lottery diversity visa. That would be unfair because a lot of Africans who come here, that's the only opportunity they have for legal immigration, is that diversity visa. Okay, when the government drops that, then you deny them the right to come here because they're not, you know, Africa and the United States don't have contiguous borders. Africans can't cross. You know, they have to come through the ocean, 11,000 miles away.
And so they have to have some kind of special visa in order to make sure that they have access to an opportunity here. Absolutely. And of course, Dr. Madu, I think we're getting ready for the final statements in reference to this. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of